Why coffee makes you more tired. Caffeine is the most widely used psychoactive substance on Earth, and most of the people using it aren't getting the effect they think they are. They're just holding off withdrawal. There's a difference, and understanding it changes everything about how you use the one thing most of us rely on to get through the day. You're listening to Your Space Today, the podcast where we decode fatigue, stress, and burnout so you can rise again. Every Tuesday, we explore the hidden connections between your habits, your health, and your happiness, giving you the tools to take back your energy and your life. Let's start with a sensation most coffee drinkers know but rarely name. It's not the pleasure of the first cup. It's not the warmth or the ritual. It's that feeling on the mornings when you don't get it. The dullness, the slight fog, the edge of irritability that arrives by mid-morning and doesn't fully lift until, there it is, the coffee appears. At some point, it stops being a pleasure and becomes a requirement. The question isn't whether you want coffee, it's whether you can function without it. And for most people, the answer is quietly, not really. I want to tell you about someone who understood this distinction the hard way. Sophie is a 39-year-old freelance translator. She's thoughtful, organized, disciplined about her health in ways that matter to her. She doesn't drink excessively. She goes to bed at a reasonable time. She doesn't think she has a caffeine problem, because by any normal metric, she doesn't. She drinks 3 cups a day. That's it. But Sophie has noticed something. On the rare days she skips her morning coffee, travel days, days when the routine breaks, she's foggy by 11. Dull in a way she can't push through, vaguely irritable for no reason she can identify. Not sick, not tired exactly, just off. She's written it off as just being that kind of person, someone who needs coffee, someone caffeine sensitive. But here's the thing. Sophie isn't caffeine sensitive. She's caffeine dependent. And those are completely different things. Caffeine sensitive means caffeine hits you harder than most. Caffeine dependent means your brain has restructured itself around caffeine's presence, and its absence is now what creates the symptoms you're attributing to being yourself without coffee. For Sophie, caffeine isn't enhancing her performance. It's restoring a baseline that caffeine itself has lowered. She's not running on caffeine. She's running a system that has been redesigned around it. In a few minutes, I'll explain exactly how that redesign happens, and more importantly, how to start reversing it. To understand what's happening to Sophie, and probably to many of you listening, we need to go back to something we touched on in an earlier episode. Adenosine. Adenosine is the brain's tiredness molecule. It builds up gradually throughout the day, accumulating as a byproduct of neural activity. The more it builds, the more tired you feel. When you sleep, it clears. When you wake, the process begins again. Caffeine works by physically blocking the receptors adenosine binds to. It doesn't reduce the adenosine, it just prevents it from delivering its message. Your brain can't feel the tiredness that's building, so you feel alert. This is the mechanism. Clear, elegant, effective. The problem is what happens next. The brain is extraordinarily adaptive. When it detects that its adenosine receptors are being consistently blocked, it responds the only logical way it can, by growing more receptors. More receptors to make sure the message gets through. This is standard neuroplasticity, the brain rewiring itself in response to a repeated signal. But in this case, the structure it's building is a bigger landing pad for tiredness, which means when caffeine wears off, the adenosine that was silently building all morning now has more places to bind, more receptors, more signal. The crash isn't imagined, it's structural. Regular coffee drinkers tend to experience sharper afternoon crashes than non-users, not because they're weaker, but because their system has been quietly enlarged in the direction of sensitivity. Now add the second layer. Caffeine also stimulates cortisol release, the body's primary stress hormone. Under normal circumstances, cortisol follows a clean daily arc. It peaks in the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking, helping you feel alert and ready, and then gradually declines throughout the day. Research on caffeine and the body's stress hormones reveals something that regular users often find counterintuitive. In people who have abstained from caffeine, a dose produces a robust cortisol spike. But in habitual users, people who drink coffee every day, that same dose produces a much weaker response. The body has adapted. The cortisol-raising effect of caffeine has been partially blunted by regular use. What this means in practice is that regular users are no longer getting the hormonal lift from their morning coffee that occasional users do. Their system has recalibrated around caffeine, and caffeine is now working harder to maintain a state it helped undermine in the first place. Think of it like borrowing energy from tomorrow to function today. It works fine for a while, but the debt accumulates. And at some point, what looks like caffeine helping is actually caffeine recovering ground it already cost you. And this leads to a question that most caffeine advice completely sidesteps. If caffeine is no longer giving regular users a real lift, only restoring a suppressed baseline, what does that mean for how we use it? Here's the paradox that keeps people stuck. Caffeine dependence feels like caffeine is working, because the alternative, no caffeine, unmasked adenosine debt, blunted stress response, feels so much worse. The relative improvement from that morning cup is real. You genuinely do feel better after it. But better than the alternative isn't the same as better than baseline. It's sub-baseline, corrected to near normal. This is why quitting caffeine as an all-or-nothing move almost always fails. The acute withdrawal, headache, difficulty concentrating, the specific flatness of a brain being asked to function without its usual chemical scaffolding, creates an immediate negative feedback loop. People exit the experiment before the system has had a chance to reset. The goal, then, is not elimination, it's recalibration. Restoring the brain's natural architecture by giving it consistent windows of operation without caffeine, long enough for the receptor profile to start normalizing. And here's what makes this particularly difficult. Caffeine dependence doesn't live in isolation. The 4 areas most directly affecting your energy are quietly amplifying each other. Blood sugar crashes from ultra-processed food make the adenosine debt worse and increase the pull toward caffeine as a corrective. The absence of regular physical movement removes the body's most efficient natural mechanism for clearing adenosine. Even a short walk, researchers have found, accelerates the metabolic processes that reduce its accumulation. Chronic anxiety and rumination raise cortisol independently. So the caffeine and stress-cortisol interaction becomes genuinely destabilizing rather than merely stimulating. And the blue light and late screens that disrupt melatonin also interfere with the overnight adenosine clearance that is supposed to reset the system each night. These aren't separate problems. They form a single loop. And caffeine is often the thing holding the loop together while the underlying structure quietly erodes. More on those connections is available at the link to our website below. The question then becomes, how do you actually work with this system, rather than patching it every morning with another cup? Let's talk about it step by step, because the answer here isn't about willpower, and it's not about quitting. The key shift is this: treat caffeine as a precision tool rather than a daily foundation. Right now, for most habitual users, caffeine is the floor, the thing that gets you to baseline. The goal is to move it back to being the thing that lifts you above baseline, which requires having a baseline worth lifting from. The way to start is specific, and it's something you can try this week. Begin with water. Your body loses roughly half a liter to a liter of fluid overnight through breathing and skin evaporation alone, a natural and unavoidable process. You wake up mildly behind on fluids every single morning before you've done anything at all. Starting the day with a full glass of water before anything else is one of the simplest and most overlooked moves you can make for morning energy. Even mild dehydration impairs cognitive function and mood. You don't need to be dramatically thirsty to feel the effects. A glass of water first is not a wellness cliché. It's addressing a genuine physiological deficit your body woke up with. Now, the coffee timing. It's called the 90-minute delay, and it's the second part of this week's experiment. For 2 weeks, delay your first coffee until 90 minutes after you wake up. Here's the reasoning. In the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking, your body produces a natural cortisol peak, the cortisol awakening response. This is your body's original built-in alertness mechanism, a biological event that non-caffeine users experience every morning without doing anything at all. The idea behind the 90-minute window is straightforward. Let that natural peak do its job first. Let your own biology handle the initial lift. Then, use caffeine to extend or amplify an alert state that your body has already produced naturally, rather than bypassing that process on arrival. The result, for many people who try this, is a noticeable shift in the afternoon. Not because the coffee suddenly got stronger, because the morning biological architecture had the space to do its job. And here's the final piece. Over time, Sophie didn't just shift when she had coffee. She reduced from 3 cups to 2 and made a point of having her last one before 2 o'clock. That second part matters more than it might seem. Caffeine has a half-life of roughly 5 to 6 hours in most people, meaning an afternoon coffee at 3 has a meaningful amount still in your system at 9 in the evening. That residual caffeine reduces the quality of deep sleep, which is precisely when the brain performs its overnight adenosine clearance. So, the last cup before 2 o'clock isn't just a timing preference. It's protecting the very system that determines how much you need caffeine the next morning. That is the loop made visible. Track what happens over the 2 weeks. Does the afternoon slump soften? Do you reach for that second cup later, or less urgently? These are signs that your natural energy architecture is beginning to reestablish itself. You're not removing caffeine, you're repositioning it. And the goal, over time, is a cup of coffee that feels like a choice, not a survival mechanism. Sophie pushed her first coffee to 9:30 instead of 7:45. She started every morning with a glass of water before anything else. Within about 10 days, she noticed something she hadn't expected. She felt less like she needed the afternoon coffee. And over the following weeks, she went from 3 cups to 2, the last one before 2 o'clock, so it wasn't quietly working against her sleep. She still drinks coffee. She enjoys it more than she did before. If you recognize Sophie's relationship with coffee, the glass of water, and the 90-minute delay are exactly where to start. If any of this felt familiar, if it explained something you've been wondering about for a while, I'd really appreciate it if you shared this episode with someone who might find it useful too. We tend to reach for coffee when we're running low, and most of us know at least one person who could use a gentler approach to their energy. Thank you for being here and for listening. I'll see you in the next episode, where we explore why your brain seems to drift and zone out at precisely the moments when you need to concentrate most, and what's actually happening neurologically when focus just disappears. Until then, take care of yourself. You deserve it. Your Space Today is published every Tuesday at 6 p.m. For detailed information, disclaimers, scientific references, visit the links below this podcast. This podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider regarding any health concerns.